Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and get into our last section of the year, which is called Classification and the Diversity of Life. But because it's a really long title, I technically usually just call it like classification. And it's all about classifying all of the different living organisms we have on our planet. Okay? Which is kind of a nice segue from where we were in the Anthropocene, looking at some of the major problems we've had. We're going to dive more into those other species that may have been affected by some of those human actions. Okay, so some of the goals that we're going to learn for this chapter, we're going to talk about the older classifying system and our current classifying system. We're going to talk about the 7 taxa or levels in which we classify organisms. We're going to get into some binomial nomenclature, which is a little daunting at first because it's in Latin. Oh, goodness. But we'll make it manageable for you. All right, we're not going to expect you to be fluent in Latin by the time that this chapter is over. And then we're going to look at how we can kind of group all the different organisms and what characteristics we use to group those organisms. So we have been talking about species ever since like the last part of evolution. So just a refresher, remember that a species by definition is any organisms that are capable of mating and producing fertile offspring. So not only can they make an offspring, their offspring can also have other offspring. Okay, so some of our weird hybrid species like mules or ligers, they are unable to have offspring, meaning that they are not true species by definition. Okay, where they're what we call hybrid species. Okay. Now when we look at species, sometimes the individuals of that particular species can appear quite dissimilar, meaning that they might not look the same between the juveniles and the elders, or maybe they look different between like males versus female, like your male peacock and your female peahen. Okay, so we see that there are definitely variations among these species, and we notice that individuals from different species do not generally reproduce with each other. It has happened on occasion, but typically it's either unsuccessful or they just choose not to because of those different isolations that we talked about from the evolution chapter, where we talked about like behavioral isolations where they have different mating behaviors that are very individualistic, okay, that wouldn't attract other species, or maybe it comes down to like a temporal isolation where they just aren't mating at the same time. All right, so remember, species capable of mating, producing fertile offspring, but I don't know what I was going to say after that. Moving on. Okay. All right, so the second part of this chapter, which I sometimes leave out of the title just because it's way too long, is the diversity of life. So when we're looking at all of the living things across our planet, we are realizing as scientists that we have so much more to explore and discover than what we may have originally thought. So every year, thousands of new species are being discovered. Biologists will use the characteristics of each of these newly discovered species to classify it with other organisms having similar characteristics. So we aren't even close to finding all of the species out there. We do not know every plant species or even every animal species, and we definitely don't know the smaller ones like your bacteria and your protist species. So what we do is when we find a new species, we go through this process called classification. And it's basically where we define animals based on what characteristics that they have with other animals, or what characteristics plants have with other plants. So it's just like a grouping system to help organize the millions of species that we have on our planet. So currently scientists have identified more than 2 million species of organisms on this earth, but estimate that 100 million different species inhabit this earth. So what this is saying is that we still have about 98 million species to attempt to find and discover on this planet. And a lot of these are going to be your microorganisms, which we haven't yet been able to capture or identify. And a lot of times it's not even just the microorganisms, because 98 million, that is a lot of species that we have yet to discover or even know about with that potential. And so a lot of times I get kids that are like, okay, well, where are they if they're like on our planet, but we don't know what they are yet? So we expect to find millions of different species in some of the habitats that you did your Powtoon presentations on. So we expect to see them in the tropical rainforests, okay, because there's a lot of undiscovered species, especially like in the plant world in your tropical rainforest. And then we can think that there's probably an unspecified number living in the oceans, because we have yet to explore the majority of our ocean floor. And in caves is where we're finding a lot of our species is too. And some of this is because we as humans have not been able to actually get to some of these locations. Like, it's not physically possible for us to get to these locations, but we hypothesize that there will be different things there once we're able to get either down deep into the ocean or into some of the caves that we have not yet explored. So the next couple of slides, these are some species that were recently discovered in the last couple years. So I kind of start back in 2014 because that's when I started teaching. And so notice that these are species that are pretty large, like this little Saki species right here, kind of closely related to your two-toed sloth. Okay. And so obviously found in the rainforests of Brazil. And you'll notice that most of these will have scientific names with them, okay, where it has the genus name, which is just a grouping level, and then their species name. And they're all in Latin, and they look a little daunting at first, okay? So here's your bald-faced Saki, discovered in 2014. Another new species we discovered in 2014 was this Bumbalanani spider. Okay, it is a group of it's part of the tarantula family. Sorry for those of you who don't like spiders. And it is named after John Lennon. So when we find a new species, the people who get to like come up with the name of them, obviously there's some like rhyme or reason to the scientific name, but sometimes they get to pick, especially when it comes to the species part of the name, something that they're interested in, or they could even name it after themselves, or a particular habit that animal has or plant has. So there's lots of different variations when it comes to species names. So like when you look at this tarantula, the Lennoni part refers to like the Lennon. So John Lennon was the scientist's like favorite musical artist at the time, so that's why he named a tarantula after him. Guess that's nice? I don't know. Depends if you like tarantulas or not. Okay. Another species discovered in 2014 is this little rodent animal, a black-tailed Enchinus, maybe a little cuter than the tarantula we saw. And so a lot of these were hidden around in the grounds, okay, and oftentimes people thought they were just like little mice, but when scientists actually got a hold of them and did genetic testing on them, they found that they were not even related to mice. Okay, they were actually more closely related to they were actually more closely related to like the chipmunk species than the actual mice species, even though they look like a mouse to us. Okay. This one, which I will have a video for you because I do have a lot of really neat videos in this chapter, so I'll kind of be embedding those into this chapter too. This one I think is really interesting, but might be what your nightmares are made of. So this is the Moroccan flick-flack spider, and what it does, it actually cartwheels down sand dunes in Morocco. Okay, so I'll put this YouTube video in for one of our assignments too. Okay, so Moroccan flick-flack spider, slightly terrifying. Okay. Some species, as we've mentioned, are going to be very small. So here is a snail species, and it is right next to the head of a match. Okay, so just to give you an idea of how small they are, which is probably why it took us to 2015 to even realize that it was a living thing and not a pebble, which it kind of looks like here in this picture. The Prismantis mutabilis is a frog, okay, that can actually change its skin texture. So if we're looking here, here's a time frame, okay, so 0 seconds, 90 seconds, 150 seconds. So what they did is they took a picture every 30 to 60 seconds or so, and they actually noticed that this frog, so some animals have the ability to change their colors, some animals have their ability to change their skin texture. So notice how 0 seconds, he looks like this, okay? And then 330 seconds later, which is only a couple minutes, okay, notice the difference of, like, he's got this strange little, like, hump here. He's changed a little bit of his coloration. While he looked kind of spiky all over here, he's kind of smoother in some parts. So this was kind of a big deal because we're trying to understand how animals can actually change the texture of their body, because we found this in a couple different organisms like frogs, like octopus. Like we saw the mimic octopus, okay? So we're doing, in science right now, we're researching a lot into how that's possible and what capabilities their cells actually have. Okay. Some more new species. We've got our ninja lantern shark, which is one that we found in the very dark parts of the ocean, which is probably why it took us to 2015 to actually find it. And so it has this glowing capability, and in class I would ask you what that is. But that glowing capability, or bioluminescence, is where it uses to actually hunt and attract its prey. I also have a video on these, which I will be putting up into Google Classroom too. Okay, so there's your ninja lantern shark. Okay. This one, if you don't like spiders, you might like this one a little bit better than that tarantula that I showed you. So its common name, okay, or the nickname for it, is the sparkle muffin spider. That name even sounds cute, right? So it's a type of peacock spider. So there's a group of spiders that have really bright colors on them, that they live in the rainforest, and they use it to camouflage in with the really bright flowers and fauna there. And so this is actually one of the peacock spiders. It's a teeny tiny little thing, okay, but you can see it has one of these beautiful bright colors to it. In 2017, if you're a Harry Potter fan like me out there, and if you're not, that's okay too, they found this weird-looking spider, which they named after the Sorting Hat that's in Harry Potter. You can see even in its scientific name, and the species name is Gryffindori, named after a part of the Harry Potter series. Okay, so this hat-shaped spider, a lot of times students go like, why is that a benefit for that spider? It's actually used to help camouflage in with the thorny plants that it tends to live around, okay? Well, to hide it from its bird species. We found some more stuff in the ocean, so here's our ghost shark found in 2017. As of now, they have yet to catch a live one, because when the pressure changes, when they bring it up from the dark parts of the ocean, the animal can no longer survive due to pressure change. But they have found some deceased ones here. Okay, so this was found in the very depths of the ocean here. Some new insects for you. So here is a little katydid. So most of you are used to seeing the katydids that are just like normal green color. This is a new species of katydid found in 2017 that actually has a leaf-like characteristic to it. We found some stingrays, so notice a lot of these are either things we found in the rainforest or things we found in the ocean. Here is a Brazilian beauty stingray, okay, found in fresh water, not in salt water. They can get very, very large, so they can get up to about 44, 45 pounds, and they can be a meter in diameter. Okay, a meter in diameter. So a huge stingray, okay, found buried within the sand of one of the rivers of the Amazon. Okay, so even things that are a meter in width, okay, we are still finding as new species. Okay, let's speed through here. All right, we found a shark in 2018. Okay, brand new species of 6-gilled sharks. We'll talk more about sharks later this chapter too. So most sharks only have 5. There's a group of sharks that live dark in the deep parts of the ocean that do have 6 that help them with circulation and oxygen, okay, which allows them to live in those very dark parts of the ocean and the very deep parts of the ocean. So this was found in 2018. In 2019, there is a family of bristlenose catfish found in the Amazon. Okay, still that rainforesty area. I actually have like the cousins of these guys in my fish tank that I have at school, if you remember seeing those there. Okay. And we also found a Pink Floyd pistol shrimp. So it's got this one claw, which is kind of weird, and it's hot pink, which is where it gets its name from. It's got this one claw that can actually snap, and the sound waves from that is actually strong enough to break the shells of the mollusks that it would be eating. So it's strong enough to even sound off, okay? And those sound waves are actually enough to crack the shell of like a clam.